What would you benefit more from, a $45,000 new car or a $45,000 new smile? Most of the time when we get phone calls from a doctor, I look at my phone and I think, okay, what happened with that case? Pay a technician, you find a good technician and you pay him well, and then another dentist will pay him $10,000 a year more and take him from you. Usually, my career, or in my experience, the feedback that I get is probably 75 to 80% negative.
The in-house labs, the technology catching up. Is it a good idea to start a lab?
It's another really good question.
And we are live. So this is a GreatLab podcast. This is one of many and one of the first ones we're doing. And I'm really, really excited to have Lewis Sharpe here from Sharpe Dental Lab. How you doing, Lewis?
I'm doing great, Seth. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be talking to my favorite lab in Nevada, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Brilliant. So I mean, look, Lewis, first thing, tell us a little bit about your lab, maybe how you started, how long you've been going, and probably the most prominent products you're doing.
Yeah, sure. I've probably been doing it longer than most of your listeners have been alive, but that's okay. I graduated from high school in 1975, and I went to a dental technician school in Salt Lake City. It was just a year program, enough to kind of get your feet wet. I graduated from that and started working in a dental lab. Then I went to Northeast Nevada, a town called Elko, Nevada, and started my own laboratory and was there for about, over 35 years, ran my lab there. Through some different circumstances, I ended up here in Southern Nevada. I'm located just outside of Las Vegas. I have 3 technicians, myself and 2 other technicians working here. So I've been a dental technician for 47 years. We specialize now in primarily full arch restorations and especially in fully digital workflow.
So you're predominantly doing full arches, yeah?
That's predominantly what we do. We do a little bit of crown and bridge for a couple of accounts that we have, but I'd rather, at my age and at my time in my career, I try to stay away from that. I try to specialize in full arch.
How long have you been specializing in that?
About, let's see, probably 6 years now.
Wish you'd started it sooner.
I wish I would have started sooner. I don't know. I feel like for a time when I was in Long Beach, I was partnered with a guy, and we were doing photogrammetry and digital workflow with the dentist there, probably before most labs and doctors were doing it. They were a little slow to get on board, and it was a little frustrating working there. But I mean, as far as they weren't adapting the technology. We were the ones that were pushing the technology. And so it was a little bit frustrating. And then when COVID hit and the wheels fell off and, everything else. But now, I wish I would have been doing this a long time ago. But as you look back, sometimes in life and in your career, things happen at certain times that put you in certain places that allow you to pursue certain things. I was able to meet some people when I went to California and network with some people that now allows me to do full arch dentistry. If I would have just decided to go out on my own and try to find clients before, it would have been a little more difficult, but I was able to network with some real good surgeons and get started doing it that way.
It sounds like, so you're pretty much saying that it's quite difficult to get into full arch without kind of having a dentist, let's call it in your pocket maybe, or like a dentist who wants.
It's difficult to get a dentist for anything, whether you're doing crown and bridge or dentures or whatever. It's difficult to get a new account, and full arch doctors, they're as difficult as anybody else. I feel like there's a lot of doctors who are inexperienced and have had some training, but are a little bit nervous about, jumping in full depth in the technology and in full arch. And so I think there's a need for some experienced mentors or people that you can rely on to help you with the technology. And so I think that's very important. And so that's kind of what I try to do, especially it's fun through ADITE to work with, the material and show technicians how to use it, doctors how to use it. And because, we have doctors with in-house labs now, and then you have laboratories
Yeah.
on their own, independent. So
Yeah. Do you think dental technicians seem to be afraid and people are worried about these in-house labs? Like, what do you think?
that's kind of the $65 question right there.
65.
That's an old saying. I've thought a lot about that. I don't know whether, if I were like right now, if I were going into dental technology, trying to find training is difficult because all of the lab schools are closed. Typically what happens is they find somebody that maybe is efficient in computer skills, so they grab them and they train them in the software. But I mean, a lot of my experience comes from years of waxing, diagnostic wax-ups, aesthetic cases, that kind of type of thing. And so you don't get that kind of training from somebody who just, you're training who used to work at so-and-so, programming for them or whatever. And so it's a challenge. I think a lot of doctors want in-house labs. If they're doing a high volume of full arch cases, they do want an in-house laboratory technician. And it would be beneficial probably to have an in-house technician. One of the things that I envy about full arch, or about technicians that work in offices that do full arch, is that they're able to go in and interact with the patient personally. They're able to see the try-in in the mouth. They're able to see the final product. They're able to watch the patient when they get the reveal, and they deliver their teeth and the patient's crying and they're saying, I can't believe that, I look like this. That is the kind of feedback and emotion that technicians lack when they're independent a lot of times, unless they're able to go to the doctor's office and participate in that.
So
Because
it sounds like you're nearly like saying if you'd recommend, if there's an opportunity, because I'm sure dentists would welcome having the technician there. Why wouldn't the dentist want more support? Who doesn't want people like, if I could have anything installed, I'd love the person to sit next to me while I'm doing it.
Yeah, and some doctors are willing to pay for training, to take specialized training. Whereas if you're working for a laboratory may not want to do that because they're afraid you're going to, there's always been kind of a little bit of a problem with labs employees leaving and taking accounts and starting their own labs and that kind of thing. It's always been an interesting business that way. And so a lot of labs are very protective, but I look at it this way from my point of view. I'm an independent lab, and I enjoy working for myself. I'm an entrepreneur. I like having the freedom of owning my own business, even though at times that's challenging.
I don't know how much
As
freedom
any
that is
business,
sometimes.
as
That people make
yeah,
that sound like
you
it's
don't.
a lot more freedom
Yeah,
than
you don't
it
get
is.
as much freedom as you normally would or whatever. But then again, I've been doing it for so long that it would be hard for me to work for someone else, because it's just the way that I've been doing it. You can have that interaction that, like I said, most of the time when we get phone calls from a doctor, I look at my phone and I think, okay, what happened with that case? And so usually my career, or in my experience, the feedback that I get is probably 75 to 80% negative. All right. So when a case goes bad or there's a problem with something, when I used to do Crown and Bridge, the shade didn't match, had to go take a shade on a single central, challenging to do, frustrating to do. And so, it makes it kind of hard when the only thing you hear all the time is negative comments or negative things. And if you're in an environment where you can see your work and see the results of the work, and that's one of the things that I try to do when I do seminars, is I ask the technicians, what are you passionate about? What do you really want to do? Because this kind of dentistry is a different level of dentistry. It's not just doing a crown, and sending the patient home and they're happy, or even doing 6 veneers and, oh, wow, my smile looks so much better. Most of these patients, their dentition is just completely wrecked. It's a mess. I've got picture after picture after picture of before photos on patients who, whether it's due to abuse of their teeth or just not taking care of them, and they have to put their hand over their mouth to talk because they're so embarrassed. And And when you can take a person like that and do a full arch restoration on them and do a smile, make their smile nice and beautiful, it changes their whole aspect and their whole outlook on life. People wonder how you can spend $15 to $20 to $25,000 an arch to have this work done, and they think it's ridiculous. And yet I look at someone in that position and I think, what would you benefit more from? $1,000 new car, $45,000 new smile. I can guarantee you, the smile is going to bring you more happiness, more self-confidence, and it'll be definitely much more return on the investment. And so that's why I like this type of work.
I got you. No, this is brilliant. So you're pretty much saying that like, when you're not doing full arch, you experience probably much more negativity, right? Because most of the time it's like there's an issue. Yeah, that'd be fair to say.
Yeah. And even with full arch, I mean, hey, arches break and things happen, and the patient, you deliver, an arch and they don't like a certain thing that they signed off on when you did the PMMA. I mean, there's always things like that, but I think there is less of that with this type of work than there is with like regular crown and bridge, that type of thing. Yes.
Okay, cool. So how do you manage to get to experience that more with the dentist? Like would like, because like, look, the reason we have this podcast is there's technicians watching this and maybe they're about to venture into full arch cases. Would you like say like nearly beg to be allowed to come in with the dentist, say, listen, I'll do this for a special rate, but I want to come see it. Yeah.
I want to come see the PMMA when you try it in.
Right.
I want to see how it looks because if nothing else, there's very few cases that I have tons of photos of cases that I've done. There's very few cases I can look at and say, I would have changed this just a little bit. I mean, we're all kind of that way. Maybe we're all too perfectionists, but yes, to interact with the patient gives me satisfaction because I get to know the patient a little bit more. And when I get to know the patient a little bit more, I have more of a desire to do a better job for them because it's a nice, sweet little lady that just came from somewhere. And she tells you the story about her teeth, and you kind of have a bond there where you're like, okay, I want to help you. I want to help fix your smile, and I want to make your life better. It's more than just grinding zirconia and firing it in the oven. It becomes very personal that way.
But of these cases, like, I mean, how often have you experienced, let's call, you've come across a case and it's been started or even is done with an inexperienced technician creating the product or an inexperienced dentist installing it? Like, does that happen often for you?
Not that often. Right. Most of the surgeons that I deal with are pretty capable, but occasionally I'll get a call and sometimes it's one that a patient comes from another office and they come to the dentist that I work with and they say, I don't like these, or there's problems with them or whatever. And I would say it happens maybe 10 to 15% of the time, something like that.
Yeah, it's significant enough to be somewhat concerning at times, I'm sure. But
yeah,
but ultimately, do you so we've established probably if they're technicians, the best way to really overcome, like, and to really probably improve or level up their experience is to actually just go experience it, right? What else can a technician
take all
do?
the courses that you can.
Yeah.
This goes to what I think you were just going to say. Find courses that you can take.
Yeah.
There are, I don't know, or even a mentor of some kind that you can find, because there aren't a lot of places other than laboratories that teach this kind of, you can take a seminar. I know of some laboratories that sponsor, like I've gone into laboratories and done seminars with them or done workshops with them where they work with the material, they learn how to use the tissue material, they learn how to use the glaze, that kind of thing. And so look for those kind of opportunities, whatever material you want to use. There's 2 or 3 different really good materials out there and 2 or 3 different really good zirconia out there. So I would, look for opportunities to take classes, take courses. Like I say, I think if you can find a mentor or someone who is willing to kind of help you and walk you through and kind of, give you a few pointers here and there, that kind of thing, it's very helpful.
Yeah, no, that's 3 great things, right? Number 1, I kind of have a dentist who's willing to let you come in and see and invest into it. Number 2, course, standard education. Number 3 is a mentor. They're 3 great pieces of advice, right?
Yes.
And if we go back to the other thing, it's like, how do like, tell us a little bit about how you handle your relationship with the dentists. Like, I know that you probably engage with them like a lot because you're doing more complex cases, but and maybe just things you see other labs just doing wrong, or you think that they might not be doing to the best of their ability.
Well, I think communication is the most important thing. I think that anytime I get a case in that I have a question about or something that I don't think is right or something that could be better or whatever, I communicate with the doctor and try to work out, what's going to be the best approach to this. That way you kind of get out ahead of any problems that might come up, later on. For example, I just had a case. It was a full upper and lower arch, and a dentist had inherited this case from another doctor, and the implant placement was just terrible. It was really bad on the upper arch especially. I mean, coming out the facials of the teeth and even trying to change multi-unit abutments, and it was just really a challenge. And so we did the PMMA try-in, and the patient, luckily, he tried to explain to her the challenges, and she was okay with that process of going to the final stages now. But I called him up and I said, hey, on this case for patient so-and-so, did you place those implants? And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, well, good, because if you would have, we would have had a problem. And I think that dentists need to be willing to hear feedback from the technician. I think this is a partnership. And I honestly think that there are some dentists who are almost afraid to talk to the technician, especially if it's an experienced technician, because they don't want to sound like they're not knowledgeable about what's going on. And I've never, ever in my career thought of a dentist like that. In fact, I usually have more respect for a dentist that would call me up and say, hey, I have a question about this. I'm not sure what to do. What would you recommend? And together you can work out something that is the best results. And so I think that communication is the biggest thing that you can do to keep your doctors close to you and to make sure that the details of the cases are, planned and are worked out ahead of time. And if there are issues, you got to talk about them and work them out. Because, I mean, face it, there's a lot of technicians that don't want to talk to the doctors either. So they just do it and send it out the door. And then when it comes back, they're like, man, why do I have to do this over again? It was their fault in the first place. And it's like, I've been there, done that. But I've also thought, well, it's my fault because I didn't bring this to their attention to begin with. So who's to blame? Both are to blame. And so I think it's important that you communicate, as much as you can. I mean, with technology today, I can snap a photo, send it to his phone. I've had FaceTime or, video calls where the patient's in the chair, they're talking to the patient, they're showing me, stuff like that. So there's a lot of technology available now that makes communication very easy to do.
I get you. So it kind of sounds like, and by the way, I would say like, so a lot of labs I talk to are in the UK, right? And I don't know if it's the same in the USA, but a lot of it is nearly kind of like dealing with the problem afterwards. And I've met so many dentists, like, so meaning, so you're kind of saying there, you need to get the dentist to have a relationship with you, that they're willing to call you before and experience that if you can, opposed to like this, like fix the problem, because that by then everyone's annoyed, right? Everyone's annoyed, the shade is wrong, whatever. Like everyone's it's just anger at that point because patients come back in, dentist is like having to deal with the same problem twice. Yeah. And
I mean, it's expensive. If a patient has to come back to the dentist, it costs them time and money
yeah,
a lot. And if
not good
it
time
comes
either.
back to the lab, costs them a lot of time and money. For example, one of the challenges I see with new doctors doing these type of cases is inadequate bone reduction. Typically you're asking for 15 millimeters on an average patient of bone reduction. That's a lot of bone. And a lot of doctors are afraid to do that because, that's just too much bone. I can't do that. There's not going to be anything left. And sometimes you can. There's different varying circumstances. But then when I get an arch that, the total thickness of the arch is only probably 9 millimeters, vertical thickness, I can almost guarantee you that's going to fracture at some point down the road. So do you tell the dentist up front and say, look, I see there's a problem here. What are we going to do to fix it? Can we open the bite a little bit? Could we maybe get a metal bar in there or something to probably reinforce the zirconia? Most of them don't want to go back in and do another surgery. So that's generally not an option. So, and I have done that. I've, where we haven't had enough reduction and the arch is broken. And I can tell them, right away, this is the problem.
I got you.
So
I got you.
if you do it beforehand, then the dentist, if it happens when they're placing it, you've already warned them. So you're out ahead of the problem
I got you.
instead of blame for
Sorry
the
to cut
problem.
across you there. Lewis, do you say this to your dentists when they start? Like, do you it's like, hey, I call up, I'm a new dentist. I want to do my first full arch case with you. What do you say? Like, what do you say that's maybe different than other technicians might say?
Well, first of all, I ask them what type of workflow that they use, if they're familiar with the digital workflow, because to me, I mean, I don't really even want analog cases if I can avoid it. And so I ask them if they are, familiar with how the digital workflow works. Second is basically how much experience do they have? Are they comfortable doing, their own implant placements? Do they understand the parameters of what it takes to get a successful full arch case? That type of thing. And those are, just some of the basic questions that I try to talk to them about. But it's hard to,
Do you not say
it's
something
hard to
around
know
like
for sure.
the communication? Like, do you not say something like, because you strike me as a guy who's going to be like, listen, please call me when you have any doubt.
Yes, absolutely. And I also tell them, look, if you want some help when you're, if you haven't, like, for example, I have a Micron Mapper photogrammetry scanner. And so if they haven't done digital dentistry, I say, do you have an intraoral scan? And they say, yeah. I say, okay, well, then let me demonstrate for you how a digital workflow works. I'll come to your office. I'll show you how to do the intraoral scans. I'll show you how to do the Micron Mapper scans, how easy and how the workflow just is much less time consuming and more accurate than the analog workflow. And typically I'll do the first one for free. I mean, if they want me to come back and keep doing scans for them, I charge them to do the scans. It introduces them to the workflow, and hopefully cements me a good client in the future, that he looks at me as a resource that he can go to ask questions and maybe, partner with.
I got you. I mean, so yes, it sounds like, look, you've built these really strong relationships with your dentists, and you mentioned before, like, the whole concern sometimes labs have about keeping everything close to their chest, right? And they're worried about the technician starting their own lab, and they're also worried about the dentist having the in-house lab, right? So that's like the two biggest fears of a lab owner. If I'm running a lab, should I be afraid? Like, how do I handle a dentist if I have a suspicion a dentist is wanting to start an in-house lab? Like, should I be afraid of that?
Well, if you have a suspicion that the dentist is about to start his own lab, the chances are pretty good that he's going to do it.
Okay. Shit, right.
Right. So either you can be a resource or you can write him off. And I think it was, maybe you ought to tell the story about your mill salesman and selling mills to dentists here when we're done. But you can tell them, look, I'll help you. I'll help you pick out a mill. In fact, I can come into your office and set you up with a workflow exactly the same way we do it in our laboratory. And I'm willing to do that. And I'll help you, and I'll be a resource for you. Whether you want to charge for that or whether you want to do it because you're trying to build relationships of trust, or you've known this guy for a while, then if things don't work out or they have complex cases or whatever, they're going to come to you for help because, they just have something that they can't handle. And one of the things that I think you and I discussed this earlier, one of the things that I've found, and that if any doctors that are listening or watching this, is I'll give you an example. I had an account that I did work for, and I started getting questions from him like, what kind of mills do you use? What kind of zirconia do you use? So on. And I knew what he was asking for. And so I just asked him, I said, hey, are you looking at putting a lab in your office? And he said, yeah, I am. And I said, well, if there's anything I can do to help you, I'd be happy to help. I think he hired somebody to come in and lay everything out for him or whatever. But one of the things that I told him, and one of the things that a lot of doctors don't understand, or maybe they don't think about, is that when you get all the equipment, first of all, you have to find somebody that knows how to run it. And doing full arch cases is complicated, complex dentistry, and it's very complex lab work. You have to know how to run the design software. You know how to run the nesting software, whatever nesting software you use. You have to know how to run the mills, how to get the best mill for these full arch cases, because some of them are not easy to mill, depending on angulation and stuff like that. You need to know how to finish the zirconia so that it looks nice, and you need to know how to center it properly. You have to know how to put the tissue and the glaze and that kind of stuff to finish. So some dentists think I can just train one of my assistants to do all this. And in fact, as I was talking to this doctor, I said, one of the things to keep in mind is that if you hire and you find a technician, which first of all is very difficult to do.
It is.
I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here in the
tough.
United States, all of the lab schools are closed. All of the old guys like me are retiring and leaving, or, so they're getting out of the business.
Yeah.
And so you do have some experienced technicians in different areas, but I said, if you can find one and hire them, you better check out what kind of work they do or have them do a couple of cases for you before you sign a contract or anything with them. Because once you hire that technician, you are stuck with the work that he does. And maybe you've been using a pretty good lab and you hire a technician and you find out after 2 or 3 arches that, well, these don't look quite as good as what we used to get. So you have a choice then. Either I have to accept subpar, in your own opinion, work, or I get rid of this technician and try to find somebody who's better. And that's difficult to do. And it's going to cost you 6 figures a year here in the United States to find a technician that's any good. And in fact, this dentist, the technician he ended up hiring, which doesn't work for him anymore, I think he wanted a $5,000 signing bonus. So I was a little bit taken back when I found that out, because I thought, wow, this guy must either really be good or he thinks he's really good. I don't know, but I don't think he works there anymore. So
Okay. Well, that's why I needed the $5,000.
Yeah, and that's what happens a lot of times is you pay a technician, you find a good technician, and you pay him well, and then another dentist will pay him $10,000 a year more and take him from you. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge to keep good, qualified technicians in your in-house lab. And so that's a problem that I don't know how many really contemplate, because they go to a seminar or someone is really, hep on, you got to have your own lab, you got to have your own lab, you got to have your own lab. And like I say, I can understand the advantages of that 100%, but there are also drawbacks and challenges with that. So you need to tell them your mill salesman story there, Seth.
My mill, yeah, it's a good story. It's just effectively, I won't say the name or the place where he lives, just for the sake of this. But this particular individual, he owns a lab, but he, in particular, had a kind of a training, let's call it a training seminar for dentists, where it's like how to create your own in-house lab. And effectively, he had these milling machines, and let's say he sold, I don't know, like 4, 6 of them, I don't know, something like that. But all the dentists have returned them. They've all returned them, and he bought them back for like 50% of what he sold them. So it was a great business in itself to do that for him, because he was delighted, because he was like, okay, I'll use them. But it was just funny because everything just, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? And like, it's just those, I think, and I can totally understand, because I've seen it too. Like, we had a lab and we ran it, but like that milling center, like the milling machine, I remember thinking like, this is a lot of work. I was frightened of that. And I think people completely, I appreciate you wanting to have a 3D printer for your, like, small volume retainers, things like that. But like, those machines themselves, now I know the 3D printers have gotten so much better now. They're the only one that I think has progressed so well that I think anyone can kind of get their head around it eventually. But the rest of the stuff is tough. And then you have to work it all together, and there's lots of time. And also, look, dentists' most important thing is to be with the patient. That's it. Like, and that's what they're the best
Most
in the
profitable.
world at. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's
most
tough.
profitable place to be.
Yeah, it's tough. It's the same.
If you have a CEREC machine and you want to do single crowns, fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. And I see dentists who sit there and design it themselves, and I still think that's a mistake, because hopefully you're booked enough that you could be in with another patient instead of designing a crown on a CEREC machine. Now, single crowns and small bridges and stuff like that are a different ballgame. As I mentioned before, this type of dentistry is extremely complex. I've got a 9 mill. I just installed it here about 6 months ago for titanium to mill titanium bars. And it's got a 12-puck changer. And I can guarantee you that it's taken us, with experience, a while to get to the point where we're comfortable utilizing this machine and making it productive, because it's advanced technology, and we've been on the line with customer support a lot, getting everything worked out. And that's normal, but it's a very sophisticated piece of machinery, and it takes a lot of knowledge and, that type of thing to get dialed in. So
So overall, it doesn't really, the feeling I'm getting from you is that you're not too worried about dentists having in-house labs.
I think it's going to increase. I think we're seeing so many dentists now that want to get into the full arch, realm, because here again, I'm speaking from the US. I don't know much about the UK, but doing, crown and bridge and being a general dentist anymore, you're getting paid by the insurance companies, and most of them can make probably a pretty decent living with that. But it's very frustrating when you get paid, by Delta Dental, X amount of dollars for a crown, and then you have to go to the technician and say, look, I can't afford to pay your prices because I only get this from the insurance company. And so now they're looking for ways for extra revenue. So they start taking all-on-4 courses. And so now the all-on-4, I think it's the golden age, you might say, of the all-on-4 restoration, because there are just tons of courses. You can, any weekend of any month of any year, you can find an all-on-4 course somewhere that you can go take.
That's true. That's true.
And so now we're seeing an increase in the volume of all-on-4 dentists, but I think there's a lot of people out there that need this too. I mean, what is it? The baby boomers, they talked about the dentures, the amount of dentures that are going to need to be produced. Well, what if you can provide them with, implant retained arches instead of dentures? And so there are tons. In fact, the doctor, his name is Dr. Sean Watashimi, that is the founder of 4M Institute in Long Beach. In his presentation, when he would talk to the doctors, he would show them statistics of the population, and how many people are going to need, these type of services in the coming years, and it's astronomical. So I think the future is bright that way. But like anything else, the more competition, the more the prices have a tendency to go lower, because the dentist down the street will do it for $1,000 less than the one you just saw up here. Maybe I'll go to him. And then the lab will do it for, $500 less. So maybe I'll do so. That's part of the game. It always has been.
So with these, I mean, like, look, with the in-house labs, the technology catching up, is it a good idea to start a lab?
That's another really good question. I would say it would depend on the circumstances. I would say probably, like, for example, I just hired my son-in-law. Okay. He has a degree in psychology, and he was a
perfect candidate for
counselor.
technician.
Yeah,
perfect
candidate. Right? Makes sense.
Yeah.
I told him, if you work for me, you've got to provide all my mental health problems for free. You got to do counseling for me and my whole family and the rest of my employees.
There you go.
Anyway, he got so discouraged dealing with society and the problems that they're seeing in the junior high schools and stuff now, that he was like, I can't stand my job. I hate it. I hate, going to work. My hands are tied. I can't do anything. I'm regulated, to death. And so I'm so tired of it. I don't want to do it anymore. And so I said, hey, why don't you come down and see what we do down here? I don't know if it's anything you'd ever be interested in. So he came down and kind of took a look and was like, well, this is kind of interesting. And then I showed him how to put tissue on an arch, and he took right to it. And then I got thinking, I remember now, he really is kind of a craftsy type of guy. He likes to do stuff like this. And so he's loving it. He's been working with me for not quite a year now. And he quit his job at the school. And so his degree is kind of, other than giving me mental advice, which is good. I need that. But what I'm trying to do, hopefully, is, because I don't have any children that are in the lab business, and none of them want it. They saw me for so many years working so many hours that, say, I don't want to do what Dad does. That guy's crazy. But he really likes it. And so our plan is to transition, hopefully, over the next several years, to where he's in a position where maybe he could take over the lab and run the lab. And so that's exciting for me, And so somebody in that position, I think, has a foot up, or a leg up, you might call it. So maybe if someone wants to start a lab, if you get the training and all that kind of stuff, maybe you could start off working in a dental lab or working for a dentist or something like that. And if
Yeah,
you get to the point where you have enough networking and clientele that you feel like you could, do something like that, then I think that would be the best way to approach it. It's kind of gradually.
I got it. So circumstantial opposed to just going out
Yeah.
and hoping for the best, really.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a lot of experience, boy, getting accounts is hard. It's hard. I mean, I've done it for years. I've gone and knocked on doors and, all that kind of stuff and sent out mailers and tried social media and all that kind of stuff. And it just is really difficult. The best way that I've found is by word of mouth from another client, recommendation, or as much as I really don't like to, is actually going to the doctor's office and meeting with the doctor, like setting up an appointment or cold calling or whatever. And if you get a chance to talk to the doctor, a lot of times you can, make some headway there, but it's hard to get clients.
I got you. It is hard to get clients. And I guess the last thing I'll ask is maybe on the subject of that, just to, if we double down on that previous question, is we mentioned the fact that you're pretty much saying having kind of a leg up, let's call it, with one of two things. One is that you can be mentored, come into a lab with maybe a guy who's maybe about to finish his lab journey, potentially. That's a great way to get an opportunity to take over a lab. I see a lot of labs like that, by the way. I actually see a lot. And
there are a lot of guys my age that are, wanting to retire, and what are they going to do with their lab? So that is a good option.
Yeah, and the other thing we talked about there was if you just have a dentist who wants to have you be their sidekick technician and maybe even just for a period learn with them. But I take it that you're pretty much saying those are the only two routes that you could see someone actually being successful with starting a new lab.
Well, it'd be hard. I mean, I remember reading articles probably 15 years ago, one like by Gordon Christensen, who's a big influencer here in the United States, talking about what are we going to do in the next 10 to 15 years when all of these technicians that are my age retire. Who's going to do the work? Who's going to, have the knowledge and all that kind of stuff to be able to do the kind of work or the work that we need? And so it was kind of like there's going to be a huge shortage of dental technicians. Well, I think there's a bit of a shortage of dental technicians, probably experienced dental technicians especially, but I don't see any less competition. I don't see like where I can go anywhere and just, pick up an account because, well, I've got a lot of experience and blah, 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 blah. There's still a lot of competition. The big labs, some of them are getting bigger. They're acquiring smaller laboratories, so they're acquiring their accounts. Little guys like me are kind of definitely still the minority. We were predicted to be out of business, the 3 to 5 man labs. So that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to transition into full arch and specialize in something, because there's a million labs that can do crowns, and as with anything, even they can outsource them overseas. They can outsource, full arch cases overseas if you want to, but you don't have the support and the knowledge that maybe you could use on the dental side in doing this kind of dentistry.
I got you, Lewis. This has been great. How can people find you and potentially connect with you if they want to?
Sure. My email is loussharpe@gmail.com, and maybe I can give you whatever you can put it up, like you said, whether you want to put some photos up or whatever.
We'll definitely put some photos up.
But it's loussharpe@gmail.com, LEWSHARP@gmail.com. I'm on social media under my name, Louis Sharpe, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I also have a Facebook page for my dental lab, Sharpe Dental Lab. So any of those places, you can message me or whatever. I'm happy to talk to, anybody.
That's great.
I like to give back. I think my philosophy has always been what goes around comes around. And if you're willing to help people and, not try to, I guess, destroy people or whatever, then you're going to eventually it'll pay off. And I found that to be true during the 47 years I've been doing this.
That's great. As I said, Lewis, you're an OG, right? So thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll end it there.
Yeah.
Thanks.